as chemical compounds in cells. Some people think a camel's hump can carry water. This is not true. They actually store fat. A hump's fatty tissue supplies energy when the camel doesn't eat. When a camel has enough food, the hump remains hard and round. But when food is scarce, the hump gets smaller and may sag to the side. If the camel then gets more food, the hump can regain its full size and shape in about 3 or 4 months. So how do you think the camel might be affected if it didn't have humps, especially in the environment in which it lives? You are made of many substances. These substances supply the raw materials that make up your blood, bones, muscles, and many other parts of you. They also take part in the process carried out by your cells. You've probably heard of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, maybe phosphorus and sulfur as well. All of these are examples of elements found in your body. An element is any substance that cannot be broken down into simpler substances. The smallest unit of an element is a particle called an atom. Any single element is made up of only one kind of atom. This picture shows a hydrogen atom. Recall that a hydrogen atom is made up of one proton and one electron orbiting that proton. There are no neutrons in hydrogen. Carbon dioxide and water are examples of compounds. Compounds form when 2 or more elements combine chemically. Most elements in living things occur in the form of compounds. For example, carbon dioxide is a compound made up of the elements carbon and oxygen. The smallest unit of many compounds is a molecule. A molecule of carbon dioxide consists of 1 carbon atom and 2 oxygen atoms. This image shows a water molecule. The larger atom, down at the bottom, is an oxygen atom. The oxygen atom has a larger number of protons, neutrons, and electrons than the 2 hydrogen atoms. When hydrogen atoms combine with an oxygen atom in the ratio of 2 to 1, it creates a water molecule. So what compounds do cells need? Many of the compounds in living things contain the element carbon. Most compounds that contain carbon are called organic compounds. Organic compounds that you may have heard of include nylon and polyester. Compounds that don't contain carbon are called inorganic compounds. Water and table salt are familiar examples of inorganic compounds. Some important groups of organic compounds that living things need are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Water is a necessary inorganic compound. Many of these compounds are found in the foods you eat. This fact makes sense because the foods you eat come from living things. So looking at this diagram here, we can see each of the macromolecules, the carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. The monomers are the single units that make them up. The functions are what they do in our body. And then we've got some examples of those things and where we may find carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. You've probably heard of sugars and starches. They are examples of carbohydrates. Energy-rich organic compounds made of the elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen are carbohydrates. The food-making process in plants produces sugars. Fruits and some vegetables have high sugar contents. Sugar molecules can combine, forming larger molecules called starches or complex carbohydrates. Plant cells store excess energy in molecules of starch. Many foods such as potatoes, rice, pasta, bread, all come from plants that contain starch. When you eat these foods, your body breaks down the starch into glucose. Glucose is a sugar your cells can use to get energy. Carbohydrates are important components of some cell parts. For example, the cellulose found in the cell walls of plants is a type of carbohydrate. Carbohydrates are also found on cell membranes. So this picture shows carbohydrates found in the lipid bilayer of your cell membrane. There's also some proteins that are attached as well. Lipids. Have you ever seen a cook trim fat from a piece of meat before cooking it? The cook is trimming away one kind of lipid. Lipids are compounds that are mainly carbon, hydrogen, with some oxygen. Cell membranes consist mainly of lipids. Fats, oils, and waxes are all lipids. Gram for gram, fats and oils contain more energy than carbohydrates. Cells store energy from fats and oils for later use. For example, during winter, an inactive bear lives on the energy stored in its fat cells. Foods high in fats include whole milk, ice cream, and fried foods. So the next time you get fried ice cream, you are getting a large number of lipids. Proteins. What do birds' feathers, a spider web, and a hamburger all have in common? The answer is that they consist mainly of proteins. Proteins are large organic molecules made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and in some cases sulfur. Foods that are high in protein include meat, dairy products, fish, nuts, and beans. Much of the cell structure and function depend on proteins. Proteins form parts of a cell membrane. They also make up parts of the organelles within a cell. A large group of proteins, known as enzymes, speed up chemical reactions in living things. Without enzymes, the many chemical reactions that are necessary for life would take too long to occur. For example, an enzyme in your saliva speeds up the digestion of starch. The starch breaks down into sugars while still in your mouth. And interestingly, a number of people carry a gene that allows for the production of an enzyme that actually allows them to turn starches directly into sugar. So the next time that you're eating a potato, try to cut a small section of a potato off and stick it in your mouth. Chew it just a small amount and wait for 2 or 3 minutes. Some people will all of a sudden start tasting sugar instead of potato. Those people contain the enzyme that turns starch directly into sugars. Nucleic acids are very long organic molecules. These molecules contain carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and also phosphorus. Nucleic acids contain the instructions that cells need to carry out all the functions for life. Foods high in nucleic acids include red meat, shellfish, mushrooms, and peas. One kind of nucleic acid is deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA. DNA is the genetic material that carries information about an organism and is passed from parent to offspring. This information directs a cell's functions. Most DNA is found in a cell's nucleus. The shape of a DNA molecule is described as a double helix. Imagine a rope ladder that has been twisted around a pole, and you'll have a mental picture of the double helix of DNA. The double helix forms from many small molecules connected together. The pattern and sequence in which these molecules connect make a kind of chemical code that the cell can read. water in living things? Water plays many important roles in cells. For example, most chemical reactions in cells depend on substances that must be dissolved in water. Water itself takes part in many chemical reactions within cells. Water also helps cells keep their shape. A cell without water would be like a balloon without air. Think about how the leaves of a plant wilt when the plant needs water. After you add water to the soil, the cells absorb the water and the leaves perk up. Water changes temperature slowly, so it helps keep the temperature of cells from changing rapidly, a change that can be harmful. Water plays a key role in carrying substances into and out of cells. Without water, life as we know it would not exist on Earth. Here are a number of different things that water does for you on a day-to-day basis. Everywhere from forming saliva for digestion, to regulating body temperature, to lubricating joints, and allowing oxygen to be delivered all over the body. So as review, the organic compounds. The type of compound are carbohydrates. The elements that make up carbohydrates are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And their functions are to store energy, and they also make up the cell wall and cell membrane. Lipids are the second type of compound. The elements that make them up are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And their function is to make up most of the cell membrane. Fats and oils also store energy. Protein is the third type of compound. The elements that make it up are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sometimes sulfur. They make up many cell structures, and they also make up enzymes which speed up chemical reactions. And finally, the last type of compound is nucleic acid. The elements that make it up are carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. And their functions are to carry genetic information, and they also direct cellular functions. Inside of your notes, please complete the graph by putting a title on it and doing the following. Put a check above the bar that shows the percentage of water in an animal cell. For number 1 inside the blanks on your notes, how does the number compare to the percentage of water in a bacterial cell? Number 2, proteins, nucleic acids. Which of the two of those make up a larger percentage of an animal cell? Number 3, in general, how do you think a bacterial cell and an animal cell compare in their chemical composition? Creating pie graphs. Use the picture to the right and create a pie graph that represents the amount of water in the human body in comparison to other compounds. Make sure that you label your graph and also give it a title. Remember, approximately 2/3 of your body is made up of water.